A nuance in this week's parsha that I've expressed in the past, I believe, is very telling. And if a person penetrates the depth, I think discloses a lot of what's really going on in this week's parsha, in the struggle between Bilam and Klal Yisrael, is the famous episode with the donkey. The donkey, of course, as we know, Vayiftach Hashem es pi ha'asayin. He gets upset at Bilam for striking the donkey. Ki kisani ze shalosh regalim. What have I done to get you so angry that you're now hitting me 3 times? And anyone that's reading through the psukim will immediately notice that this is a strange phrase for the Torah to use. When the Torah wants to use the term 3 times, the Torah does use the word pe'amim, shalosh pe'amim. That would be the normal phrase for the Torah to use in such a case, and therefore it's striking that the Torah uses not once, but a few times the lashon of shalosh regalim. Shalosh regalim already conjures up in our mind a different concept, and in fact, Chazal tell us that the two are in fact connected. Why is it that over here the Torah uses the expression Lama kisani? Why have you hit me? Kisani zeh shalosh regalim. Why does it say shalosh regalim as opposed to shalosh pe'amim? So Chazal say that the message being sent from the asayin, from the donkey to Bilam, was you want to be oiker, you want to uproot a nation chaygeges shalosh regalim. You want to uproot a nation which celebrates the shalosh regalim. That's impossible. And again, anyone who's reading such a Rashi, who's reading Chazal, like many of the Mefarshim, are somewhat struck by the fact that the Torah goes out of its way to describe the mitzvah of shalosh regalim in particular. Bilam wants to uproot Klal Yisrael. The message to Bilam should be, you want to uproot the Am HaNivchar? You want to destroy the Rabbi Shalom's people, the people he took out of Mitzrayim, the people that had a Matan Torah, that he revealed himself to in front of Fnei Cholam Ve'edi. You want to uproot such a nation, an Am Segula? That we would understand. But the fact that the donkey chooses, and obviously through the Rabbi Shalom as a shliach of the Rabbi Shalom, chooses to pick on one mitzvah, Lama hikisani shalosh regalim, that is somewhat striking. What is it about the mitzvah of chaygeges shalosh regalim, the nation that celebrates 3 regalim, that this speaks exactly to Bilam, in what Bilam was trying to accomplish? So herein lies a tremendous insight into the Parsha of Bilam, Parshas Balak. We know that Chazal draw a very, very important contrast between 2 figures in the Torah. The 2 figures you find on the pages of Pirkei Avos is, of course, Avraham Avinu and Bilam. And it's, again, very, very interesting. Why, of all people, Avraham Avinu and Bilam? There are many Rishaim that Klal Yisrael has, many antagonists trying to attack Klal Yisrael throughout the pages of Chumash. Right? If you want to pick your biggest Rasha, would we pick necessarily Bilam? There are many different options. You could pick Paro. Paro was a pretty bad guy, right? So why specifically Bilam is being compared to specifically Avraham Avinu, not Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Why was Avraham Avinu chosen to be compared to Bilam? And the secret really lies in the pages of the Chumash. Why? Because where do you see in the pages of the Chumash that the Torah is already calling this comparison to your attention? And it seems from a very simple expression. We know that when it comes to Avraham Avinu and things that Avraham Avinu was told, such as the Akedah, but by the Rebbeinu Shalom to do, the Torah tells us, Vayachavoishes chamaroi, Avraham Avinu is vayashkem, he gets up early in the morning, Vayachavoishes chamaroi, and he goes and gets the donkey ready to go and do the Akedah. And Rashi over there says, what's the point? Why is the Torah describing this? However they used to use transportation, that's how he got there. You have to tell me, Vayachavoishes chamaroi, says Rashi, no. Chazal are telling us, the Torah is telling us that there was a certain zerizus, there's a certain excitement Avraham Avinu wouldn't normally be the one to get the car ready. Avraham Avinu wouldn't normally be the one to Vayachavleishes Chamayra. He would have people that would help him. He was the elder statesman, right? He would have his children, his avodim. So why is he going to the Chamar? So the Torah tells us because Ha'ava Mikalkeles Es Hashura. Avraham Avinu was so excited. He was so impassioned, so excited about Akedas Yitzchak. The Ahavas Hashem was Mekalkeles Es Hashura, and therefore he ran himself. He ran himself and did it himself, something which he normally would have delegated to one of his avodim, one of his children. To the same degree that Ahava Mekalkeles as Hashura, the Torah tells us in our parasha, Parshas Balak, that the same thing when it comes to Bilam. Bilam is commissioned to curse Klal Yisrael. Vayakam Bilam baboker. Bilam gets up early in the morning. Vayachavoyish es asoino, and he too gets the donkey ready. And why again is it telling us how Bilam got over, how Bilam was using the transportation, that he got it with a donkey? Because, says Rashi, that the Torah is telling us for the same exact reason. The same way that by Avraham Avinu it was Ava Mikalkeles as Hashura, the same extent when it comes to Bilam, it was Hasina Mikalkeles as Hashura. Bilam was so excited to uproot Klal Yisrael, was so excited to do damage to Klal Yisrael, so it was so excited, so therefore he did it himself, something which he normally, the Navi, he normally would have delegated to someone else, that he did himself. What the Gemara is clearly telling us over here is that the difference between Avram and Bilam is the difference in an Ahava Mekalkeles Es Hashura and a Sinah Mekalkeles Es Hashura. The contrast that Chazal are trying to draw is a very specific contrast. It's not specifically, not only between a Rasha and a Tzaddik. There are many Rishonim on the pages of Chumash, there are many Tzaddikim on the pages of Chumash. There's a very specific contrast that the Torah is trying to draw. It's the difference between Avas Hashem, overwhelming, unbridled Avas Hashem, Hamikalkeles as Hashura, compared to overwhelming Sinas Hashem and Sinas Yisrael, which is Makalkeles as Hashura. And this, in fact, is the defining feature of Avraham Avinu, and the defining characteristic of Avraham Avinu, which is bequeathed to Klal Yisrael and becomes the defining characteristic of Klal Yisrael. We know that Avraham Avinu has every excuse in the book. That is what defines Avraham Avinu. He's sitting out in the morning in front of his tent. He has every excuse to be inside. And why isn't he inside? He has valid excuses. He just went through a bris milah. Why is he not inside? Because he's not interested in what he has to do. He's interested in doing what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants him to do. He's interested in figuring out what Ratzon Hashem is and chasing Ratzon Hashem, even if it's not obligatory. That's Ava Mikalkeles Es Hashura. And that's what the Gemara tells us, that the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted to pater Avraham Avinu, and what was he? Hoitzi chama min artike. He takes out a very hot sun to try to make it that it's too hot for anyone to come, but Avraham Avinu wouldn't let go. That's Ava Mikalkeles Es Hashura. And that Midah was bequeathed to Klal Yisrael. The Gemara tells us at the beginning of Meseches Avodah Zarah that Le'asid Lavoi, the Me'umos Ha'olam, are going to come to the Rebbeinu Shalom. They're going to say, you didn't give us a chance, it's not fair. So the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to say, I'll give you one chance right now. And what's the chance he's going to give them? Mitzvah Kala Yesh Li Biyadi Sukkah Shemo. I have a very simple mitzvah, and Sukkah is its name. Go and be Mekayim the mitzvah of Sukkah. Then the Umas Ha'olam go al Gagoyisein, they go on the roofs and they build a Sukkah. They're sitting in the Sukkah, and then what does the Gemara say? Again, the Medrash says, once again, Hoitzi chama min artike. He brings out a hot sun, the Umas Ha'olam kick the Sukkahs and go inside. And of course, it's mind-boggling. You want to test the Umas Ha'olam if they're going to do the mitzvahs, test them if they're going to do the mitzvahs. Says the Gemara, why are you making them potter? The Gemara says, you're right, it's not their fault that they went inside. But it was the way that they went inside. They were boyed b'sukkahs, they kicked the sukkah. What does that mean? It means that the Rebbeinu Shalom, when wanting to define for Klal Yisrael the difference between Klal Yisrael and the Umas HaOlam, he does not point to Shmiras HaMitzvahs. It's not Shmiras HaMitzvahs that differentiates Klal Yisrael from the Umas HaOlam. What the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to show the Maila of Klal Yisrael is what does Klal Yisrael's response when they're patur from a mitzvah, and what's the Umas HaOlam's response when they're patur from a mitzvah. Why is that what the Rebbeinu Shalom was pointing to? Why not point to Mesiras Nefesh for doing mitzvahs? No. The Rebbeinu Shalom points to our reaction when we're unable to do mitzvahs. When it's hoitzi chama min artik and he paters Avraham Avinu says, I'm doing it anyways because it's ava mikalkeles es ashura. And when he wants to show why umas ha'olam aren't zoiche to what Klal Yisrael zoiche to, it's not because you were mekayim mitzvahs, it's because you were excited, you were happy when you couldn't be mekayim mitzvahs. And when I was hoitzi chama min artika, instead of being upset, like Avraham Avinu, that you're not be able to do the Ratzon Hashem, you kick the sukkah. What defines Klal Yisrael is this midah of Avraham Avinu, willing and wanting to do the mitzvahs Hashem, even when we're pater, even when we have a good excuse, even when it's hoitzi chama min artike, still we go out of our way to do it. That's Avraham Avinu, and that's what defines Klal Yisrael. And that's the distinction that Chazal are drawing between Avraham Avinu and Bilam Harasha. After all, Klal Yisrael is defined. Why do we get special treatment from the Rebbeinu Shalom? What does the Gemara tell us? Yisa Hashem panav einacha v'yasei mechashalom. Rebbeinu Shalom favors us. Ask the Gemara, how could the Rebbeinu Shalom favor us? Lo yisa fanim. We're not supposed to favor. What does the Gemara say? But my nation, who I was mitzvah them only to say Birkas Hamazon after Achalta V'Savata, after being full, and they go ahead and do it after Abeya. Again, what gives us a special status? Not that we do Birkas Hamazon, that's not what the Gemara says. The fact that we go above and beyond, we're looking for ways to do Ratzon Hashem even when we're not mitzvah. That's what makes us the children of Avraham Avinu. And that's the contrast that Chazal are trying to draw between Avraham Avinu and Bilam. If you have in the height of a person who is ahava mikalkeles es ashura, loves Rebbeinu Shalom Solat, he's looking for opportunities to be Oved Hashem even in areas that he doesn't have to. On the opposite extreme, you have a Bilam Harasha, who is looking to be able to avoid any opportunity. He'll do Ratzon Hashem. He'll do what the Rebbeinu Shalom makes him do. But if he has an opportunity to avoid doing Ratzon Hashem, and it fits within the rules and the legalities, he'll take advantage of that. That's the distinction between Avraham Avinu and Bilam. Says Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, a beautiful insight. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman develops that there's a concept in halacha called Ratzon Hashem. He says, you see that there's a concept even before Matan Torah of the Avos keeping dinim derabanan. He says, what type of mandate was there to keep dinim derabanan? The Torah wasn't given yet. Chazal had no koyach. So says Rabbi Chanan Wasserman in the beginning of Kuntres Divrei Seifim, there's a concept of Ratzon Hashem. It means you're not mitzvah, but you want to do Ratzon Hashem. You try to figure out what Ratzon Hashem is, and you go ahead and chase it. Says Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, this was the problem with Bilam. He knew what the Rebbeinu Shalom was requiring of him, and what the Rebbeinu Shalom told him, but he also knew what Ratzon Hashem was. But he wasn't interested in doing Ratzon Hashem. Says Rabbi Chanan, Ulefi pshutei hamikros nireh shezeh haya avayna shabil. And you want to know the sin of Bilam? He wouldn't be over what the Rebbeinu Shalom told him to do. But when he knew that the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted something and there was a way of getting out of it, he would chase after that. That's the opposite of Avraham Avinu. At the end of the day, Bilam tells Balak, you could give me all the money in the world. If the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't want, I can't do it. It sounds like Bilam understands this. Lo ucha lavor es pi Hashem. Mahi rishasa. So what did Bilam do wrong? Aval be'emes av sheyada Bilam heitev. Even though he knew well, kalichasa lekalal es Yisrael hu neged ratzon Hashem. Lo yichasha shal zeh. You're right. He understands that he couldn't be over pi Hashem. But as long as the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't articulate it, even if he knew that it was against ratzon Hashem, Bilam wasn't interested. The exact opposite of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu is Ava mikalkeles es ashura. Unbridled Ava, going to chase after Ratzon Hashem even when I wasn't mitzvah. Bilam is the exact opposite. Bilam is unbridled sinas Yisrael. And as long as the Rebbeinu Shem didn't say black and white, Pi Hashem, tell me I can't do it, even if I know well that it's against Ratzon Hashem, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. And it's really fascinating when you think about it. It's interesting. The concept of Tsar Balei Chayim, Rav Asher Weiss has a long ma'aracha trying to understand where does the Isser of Tsar Balei Chayim come from. He ends up concluding that it must be that it's against Ratzon Hashem. There's no clear Isser in the Torah, but it's against Ratzon Hashem. I always thought it was ironic because at the end of the day, the Rambam tells us, where do we learn Tsar Balei Chayim from? We learn Tsar Balei Chayim from Bilam, the fact that he's hitting the donkey. And the concept of Ratzon Hashem, according to Rav Chanan, that was exactly the problem with Bilam. So we learn from Bilam that yes, even though there's no pasuk in the Torah that tells us Tsar Balei Chayim, but we learn from this parsha that yes, you have to chase after not only what is Dvar Hashem, but what is Ratzon Hashem as well. What emerges here is something fascinating. You have Avraham Avinu and Bilam. Two individuals. They came from the same place according to most Mefarshim. They came from Aram Naharayim. And they're clearly compared and contrasted on pages Chumash, Vayachavoishes Asaynoi, Vayachavoishes Chamaroi. Chazal make that contrast very clearly. The difference between them is not in doing in Devar Hashem, but in chasing after Ratzon Hashem. One is Ahava Mekalkeles Es Hashura, my love for the Rebbeinu Shalom, I go above and beyond. And one is Sinna Mekalkeles Es Hashura, I hate the Rebbeinu Shalom and his Torah and Klal Yisrael so much that unless I have to do it, I'm not going to do it. And look where they came from. Avraham Avinu came from a place where he wasn't expected, he had no exposure to the Rebbeinu Shem. He came entirely on his own. Bilam is the exact opposite. The exposure he had to the Rebbeinu Shalom is more than any other non-Jew. The Rambam writes that the reason that they were given Bilam is so that they wouldn't have any claim. You were also given a Navi. So you have a person with no exposure to the Rebbeinu Shem from Aram Narayim. You have a person with complete exposure to the Rebbeinu Shem from Aram Narayim. The one without any exposure loves the Rebbeinu Shalom so much, it's overwhelming, it's a Ahava Mekalkeles Es Hashura, he's drawn to be the father of the Jewish people, the Am Segula. You have a person, Bilam, who's exposed to so much of the Rebbeinu Shalom, he's given Nevuah. But since he's not interested in following Ratzon Hashem, the desire of the Rebbeinu Shalom that drags him down, he's ultimately from the greatest Rishon. It shows you that it's not about what you're given. It's not the situation you were put in. Avraham Avinu was put in the worst spiritual situation you can imagine. His parents were Oivdei Avodah Zarah. Bilam was put in the best spiritual situation you could imagine. He was given Nevuah. But the attitudes brought them to very, very different places. That l'chora is the message that the Rebbeinu Shalom is telling us. And this, I believe, is why the Torah tells us, Ki kisani gzeh regolim. Why? Of all the mitzvahs in the Torah, the mitzvah which is pointed to, you want to uproot a nation, asher chaygeges shalish regolim, that celebrates the gimel regolim. Of all the mitzvahs, why not Shema? Why not Tefillin? Why not any other mitzvah? This is the mitzvah chosen because the difference between a Bilam and Avraham Avinu, the difference between the Klal Yisrael and the Ummah Ha'olam is not about whether we do the mitzvahs, whether we say Shema, to put on Tefillin. That other nations could do. But the way in which we do the mitzvah, we do with a passion, we do with an Ava. It's Ava Mekalkeles Es Hashura, which is expressed in the simcha with which we do a mitzvah, that we're excited to do. We're not doing it because we have to, we're doing it because we love doing it. And which mitzvah is associated with simcha more than other mitzvahs? Usmachtem lefnei Hashem, the gimel regalim. And that's why Chazal used the lashon. Ha'am, you want to uproot a nation. Asher chaygeges, not asher oilim. Asher chaygeges, that celebrates in front of the Rebbeinu Shalom 3 times a year. That the avodah Hashem is not an avodah, it's not a burden, it's not a shibud. But asher chaygeges shalosh regalim, you want to uproot a nation that enjoys, that has passion, that has excitement of avodah Hashem. That's what you're trying to uproot. This is what you don't understand, Bilam. It's not about what you have to do, it's about what you want to do. This is the difference between you and Avraham Avinu, and this is the real distinction that the Torah is trying to describe and communicate to Klal Yisrael. Where Bilam HaRasha was given the greatest of spiritual circumstances, but his lack of desire to want to do Ratzon Hashem brings him to the depths of Tumah. Avraham Avinu was born into a very difficult situation spiritually, but his desire to figure out Ratzon Hashem, whether he was chayiv or pater, that's what brings him to the highest spiritual state. It's not the situation we're born into, it's what we make of that situation. This is the ultimate lesson the Torah is teaching us in the parsha of Balak.